In this video, we're ready to work on Discourse 1.1. But before we do this, I want to go fix that verb run away, which I mentioned in the previous video. We want to make, when TBTA imported this from the Word document, it had no way of knowing that away is a modifier. So we're going to delete run. We're going to add a modifier, away. And again, we keep our names very simple. We'll just call it post-verbal modifier. Okay, ran, has run, running, and runs. Okay, so now let's go back, and we're ready to work on Discourse 1.1. And in our Word document, our grammar introduction, document number 1, which we gave to our MTTs a long time ago, we have the story about David and Goliath. And here, okay, before this story, we were dealing with single sentences. All of these were single sentences. Here, we now have verses, more like in the Bible. So we have Discourse 1.1 and the entire verse. But we break it down into individual sentences. So we see Discourse Chapter 1, verse 1, sentence 1. Chapter 1, verse 1, sentence 2. Sentence 3. And then comes Discourse 1, Chapter 1, verse 2. Sentence 1, sentence 2, sentence 3, sentence 4, sentence 5. And we have it broken down into individual sentences because at the very beginning, there will almost certainly be multiple issues per sentence. So even when we look at just Discourse 1.1.1, there will probably be multiple issues. If you had to deal with the entire verse, there would be too many issues. So the document has it sentence by sentence, and when we come here, we go into single sentence mode. So now we see just one sentence at a time. And so now, when we say Discourse Chapter 1, verse 1, sentence 1, TBTA goes to the Word document and gets Chapter 1, verse 1, sentence 1. So a man named Saul was the king of Israel. And we see that up here. So now we can work on individual sentences. We see that there's one issue, and the verb to be is highlighted in purple. Okay, if we look here, the man was an officer for the army. So this takes a state NP. All of the verbs to be, all of our senses of the verb to be, take a state NP. And then this one also takes a beneficiary. So let's work on this. Oblique 1, 4, and we'll turn it on. I won't include an example here by going like that, because it would be nice to have an example that actually includes 4. So I'm going to delete that. An example with 4 is in Luke 7:2. But anyway, this is good for now. So no more issues. Let's generate the sentence. A man named Saul was the king of Israel. Generated text is identical to document's text. By the way, we can adjust the height of this window. If we go to Setup, right here, height of window at top of screen for target text. So when we're in single sentence mode, let's make this a bit taller. And when we're in the entire verse, let's make this a bit taller. Okay. You can see. Okay, that's enough. Okay, now we can see all of it. Now when we're in single sentence mode, we can't save the verse. This button is disabled as long as we're in single sentence mode. So this sentence is done. Let's go to our next sentence. Chapter 1, verse 1, sentence 2. King Saul led. Let's work on the theta grid adjustment rule for lead. Okay, lead takes many noun phrases. So it takes a destination. Saul led the army to a valley. Then it takes a source. Yahweh led Abram from Ur to this land. It also takes an instrument NP. Yahweh led the people to his house with his power. So we can say source would come first in English, oblique 1. Then oblique 2, oblique 3, oops, Source will take from. Destination will take to. And the instrument we'll use with. Turn it on. Here we'll use this comment. Led Israel's army to a valley. Okay. Okay, the verb to be, the locative sense. Okay, this takes a state NP, like all the senses of the verb to be do, but it also takes a source. The hole was 20 meters from the pen. And we won't put in a comment here. Okay, King Saul had led Israel's army to a valley that is in Judah. The MTT said was in Judah. Okay, the reason for that, in our analysis, we use what we call relative time. And if we rest our cursor here, the time is present and the target tense and form is present. For our relative clauses, we use relative time, meaning the time of the relative clause is expressed in relationship to the main verb. So here, lead was in the past. Let's initialize. Okay, lead was in the past, but this happened at the same time. This verb in the relative clause, this event happened at the same time. So we mark this as present, meaning it happened at the same time. If this had happened before the main verb, this would be one of our levels of past tense. If this were to happen after the main verb, this would be one of our levels of future tense. But in English, we don't use relative time when we talk. So we want to a valley that was in Judah. And many languages, they also don't use relative time. So we have a rule in the library. Not here. Common transfer rules. Rule number 13. When main verb's time is discourse and subordinate clause's verb is present, set subordinate tense to discourse. So this will look at when this is for an object complement, but we have 10 structures in here, and some of them deal with relative clauses. Like this one deals with a relative clause that's in an object complement. So we've developed this rule for you. Some deal with direct quotes because we don't want this rule applying in direct quotes. Anyway, we have this rule. It's in the library. All you need to do is drag it up to your grammar. Now we always drag to group names, so let's drag it to this one here. Common transfer rules copied from the library. So if we drag this up, and now when we look at our time here, we see that time is past, target tense and form is past, and we see features change from time equals present to discourse by complex concept insertion rule, common transfer rules copied from the library, rule 11, copied from the library when main verb's time is discourse and subordinate clause's verb is present, etc. That's the one we just copied. So 11. And now when we generate this verse, King Saul had led Israel's army to a valley that was in Judah. Generated text is identical. Let's go to the next sentence. Okay. Prepare. Okay, prepare only takes an agent, so we can say unnecessary. Okay, fight. This is to fight a war when armies fight, not like when individuals fight. So this sense of fight, okay, it takes a patient, it takes an agent, it takes an instrument. Down in Daniel 11:25, the king fought the man with an army. So it takes an instrument noun phrase, with an army. And it also takes a beneficiary down in Judges 4:14. Yahweh fought Sisera for Barak. So let's say, here we would say instrument comes first, so let's make it /1. The beneficiary would come last, /2. This will be with and for. We won't record a comment here because we don't have any of these noun phrases. Okay. King Saul and his armies was preparing to king and his fight Philistia's army. Okay, so we have several issues here. Okay, was preparing. Right here. By the way, you can double click here and TBTA will find it in the analysis window. Okay, was preparing. Okay, was works for third singular. John was preparing. It also works for first singular. I was preparing. But for King Saul and his army were preparing. If it's you singular, you were preparing, and we were preparing, and you all were preparing, and they were preparing. But for I and he, we want was. So this was inserted by layer 6, row 1. Layer 6, row 1, right here, was. So this only works for third singular and first singular. Let's make a copy of this row. And we'll make this one more specific. You always put the more specific ones later in the layer. So let's make this one first and third singular. So first and third singular. John was sitting, that's still fine. Okay, first and third singular, they want was. For everything else, we need were. Okay. King Saul and his army were preparing to king and his fight. Okay, king. Okay, king is modifying this noun. And if we look here, surface realization is big pro. And you may remember, back when we imported our table for the adverbial clauses, in order to clauses, we always set the agent to big pro for English. Features change, the top line. Features change from surface realization equals noun to big pro by complex concept insertion rule. Common transfer rules copied from the library. Rule 9 for all adverbial clause types at preposed or postposed and big pro. Structure 11. So this was set to big pro. And whenever a noun has been set to big pro, all of the modifiers should be deleted. We have the same problem here, the same issue. Surface realization is big pro. And here's another modifying noun phrase. So you may remember, okay, let's close the library now. You may remember down here, we have a rule for pronouns. Delete all constituents that modify pronouns. And here we have surface realization equals personal pronoun. So this wouldn't work for big pro. We could say here features and include big pro like that. But there's an easier way, so we're not going to do that. I'm going to say cancel and cancel. The reason is, for personal pronouns, we don't delete all of the modifiers. We delete most, but not all. We can say some of you, or many of them, or a few of us. So for certain modifiers, like a few or many, even when it's a personal pronoun, we want to keep them. But when it's big pro, we absolutely want to delete all of them. So we have an easy way to do that, and I think that will be true in most languages. Go to the grammar tab, and delete all constituents modifying big pro. Activate that. Okay, the big pro character is lowercase b. Let's check that. Feature set. If we go to nouns, surface realization. Okay, big pro is lowercase p. So lowercase p is proper. If you want to change that, you can choose any of the characters that are used for surface realization features, but we want to leave it as lowercase p. Okay? So now, King Saul and his army were preparing to fight Philistia's army. And so this is big pro. To see constituents that are deleted, you can see it rest here, and you see king deleted by, delete all constituents that modify big pro. And the word and was deleted, and Saul was also deleted. Okay? So, generated text is identical. Let's go to the next sentence. Okay, there isn't another sentence. So we've worked through all of the sentences in this verse. Let's go back to the full verse and let's generate it. Okay, generated text is identical. Now we can save the verse. And we're ready to go to the next verse. And again, go back, oops, not there, go back to single sentence mode. And we'll save this verse for the next video.